Hey, great to see you again, valued subscriber. What? You're not a valued subscriber? Well, tick that button just down there and you will be. But anyway, to the point of today's video. I think I need to set the record straight a little bit because I don't know whether it's the way I'm portraying myself in videos or the way people are taking what I'm saying in videos. But I want to set the record straight as to my standpoint on Canon, Sony, that sort of thing, and kind of talk about what I think both of them should be doing, because neither of them are completely perfect. So firstly, my standpoint on Canon. Recent videos I've done have had people commenting, saying about me bashing Canon and now turning into a DSLR hater since switching to Sony, etc, etc, etc. I need to kind of make this absolutely abundantly clear, okay? I don't hate Canon, okay? Canon, up till about a month ago, was the only camera manufacturer I ever owned, okay? I had their cameras for 5-6 years, starting off with the Rebel series, working my way up through the 7D, onto the 5D Mark II and the 5D Mark III, and yeah, had them for, what, half a decade or more, and would happily defend them to the hills, okay? Even now, people ask me about cameras, and I say, Canon is a great starting point, okay? The lower end cameras are very cheap, are very affordable, and they're very user-friendly. Where my relationship with Canon has started to fall apart is at the higher end of the market. Because it seems to me like Canon have basically spent the best part of, what, 30, 40 years, basically while digital cameras have been kind of growing, they've spent all that time pushing the innovation, and then about 5 years ago, it's felt like they'd conquered everything. They were, you know, king of the land, nothing could touch them, and they just basically just sat back and stopped caring. And nothing they've come out with then has really been all that mind-blowing. You know, everything's just been small incremental upgrades, and it just feels like they've got all this tech sitting in a warehouse somewhere that they're just refusing to put out. You know, if you think about other camera manufacturers, okay, Sony are going mental at the minute with bringing out basically a new camera every, what, 6, 8, 12 months, something like that. They're on to the third generations of A7 cameras since Canon brought out the 5D Mark III. Or Nikon, for example, okay? They brought out the D850 not long after all of the market shares showed that they'd slipped behind Sony and were kind of just disappearing. And they brought out the D850 with in everything and the kitchen sink in it because they needed to try and not only keep people with them, but try and draw people away from other systems over to them as well. So you've got all these camera manufacturers like Sony and Nikon and Panasonic and Fuji who are all trying to best each other and make sure that their equipment is the best possible on the market to try and draw people over to their systems. Whereas Canon's mindset seems to be very different because obviously you speak to a novice who wants a camera, Canon is the first name that pops into their head. So they buy an entry-level Canon camera. There's no shortage then of models to upgrade to as you go further on down the line. The whole time you're with them, upgrading your camera, you're buying all these lenses that are Canon mount lenses. By the time you work your way up the ladder and you're looking at the likes of the 6D Mark II and the 5D Mark IV and comparing it up to other camera manufacturers, and you're like, hang on, that's just nowhere near what other manufacturers are offering. But brand loyalty keeps you with Canon because you don't want to switch because you've got all these lenses that you would have to swap over as well. And I think that is one of the things that keeps a lot of people tied into Canon. I mean, some people obviously just really like Canon as well, but I am seeing a growing number of comments from people saying, I don't want to lose the lenses. You know, I don't want to have to sell all the lenses to buy new lenses, and you know, and how well do these lenses work with an adapter on a Sony body? Is that an option for me? So there's obviously a lot of people who want to switch to better cameras, but are held back by the lenses. And I think Canon play on that a lot. I think Canon know a vast majority of the people invested in their system won't switch unless there is a real need to. So Canon don't need to keep their tech ahead of the competition. They don't even need to keep their tech level with the competition. They just need to keep their tech close enough to the competition that there's no real incentive for people to jump ship to another system. So I know there was a recent video from Tony and Chelsea who was saying about, you know, a conspiracy that Canon are going to unleash this monstrous mirrorless camera onto the world that's just going to be by far the best camera that anybody's ever seen. But I don't think that's the case, and I don't think that's going to be the case because Canon have no need to. As long as their market share is staying as dominant as it is, there's no incentive for them to do it. Because they know they can keep all of that tech back and just keep people reeled in on the promise of more stuff's going to come in the future. Why give people everything you've got in one big hit and then have to go back to the drawing board and, you know, spend a load of money on research and development, coming up with new ideas to put in your cameras for 2 and 3 years down the line? Where instead they can just drip feed everything out and go, yeah, okay, well, here's a little bit. Oh, wait with us 2 or 3 more years and it's going to be a little bit better. Wait for us another 2 or 3 years again and we're going to make it a little bit better again. So they'll just stretch everything out and milk it for as long as they possibly can. And that was also highlighted with the 70-200 announcement. Now, that video that I did got a lot of backlash from people basically saying that I was bashing Canon. Even without testing the lens, I was just bashing Canon. And the point that I was trying to make in that video wasn't that it was going to be a crap lens, okay? I said in that video, and I will say it again, the Canon 70-200 2.8 is probably the best 70-200 lens on the market. I owned the IS Mark II for about 4 years, and it was absolutely unbelievable. Now, I'm not saying that the lens couldn't be made better. Obviously, everything can always be made better. My point was that the changes that Canon made were so kind of minusculely pointless that they might as well have just not bothered with it. Yes, they changed the coatings, which from the limited reviews that I have seen so far make a small difference, but not really much of a difference over the Mark II. You know, Canon updated the f4 at the same time, and to be fair, the f4 was at least an improvement. The minimum focus distance was brought down, the stabilizing unit was changed, they changed the aperture system to a 9-bladed system. Why didn't they do that with the 2.8 as well? You know, release an IS Mark III, by all means, go ahead. But at least making it a substantial upgrade, even if it means making it a bit more expensive, but give it something worthwhile. You at least think, right, well, it's a justifiable upgrade. You giving the people the option of going, right, well, here's a Mark III, here's a Mark II, pick which one you want. Not, here's a Mark III, here's a Mark II, there's no bloody difference between them. So I was not opposed to the idea of a Mark III lens, that, you know, that was never in doubt. Technology moves on. You know, when the IS Mark I came out, everybody thought it was fantastic. Then Canon released the Mark II, which had a fleet of changes, and it was suddenly, you know, this unbelievable lens compared to the Mark I. That's what they should have done with the Mark III. You know, bring out a Mark III that put on something like a 5D SR is going to put the Mark II to shame. You know, it's not like anything Canon do, I'm immediately going to slate. If they do something that lackluster, I'm going to slate it in exactly the same way as if Sony or any other camera manufacturer did such a pointless change to an item and tried to resell it as something completely new, I would bash them for it. I am not the only person who have said that Canon have been lacking and not been innovating as much as they used to. In fact, Canon themselves, in an interview, accepted they needed to innovate more. Except since that announcement went out, the big releases from Canon have been the 4000D, which was basically the specs of a 10-year-old 550D with a new badge. That's not innovating. That's money for old rope. An M50 mirrorless camera, which to be fair is a good little stills camera, but they intentionally held that back with useless 4K footage because of the stupid crop factor and no autofocus. Not because the camera wasn't capable, but because by their own admission, they didn't want the M50 to tread on the 5D Mark IV. And now they bring out the 70-200 2.8 Mark III, which they've basically changed nothing. That's not innovating, that's just tweaks. So it's not that I specifically go out to bash Canon because I want to make a point against Canon. You know, I don't need to. I made the point against Canon when I left them in the first place, and that's why I did. I'm a hybrid shooter, okay? I shoot stills and I shoot video, so I want a camera that's going to do both very well. And Canon don't offer that because they're so dead set on making sure that there's always a better camera to try and force people to upgrade. The Sony offered me what I was looking for. If Canon had brought out the 5D Mark IV with better video features like they'd put in the 1DX Mark II, I probably would have stuck with Canon and gone with the Mark IV. But obviously Canon didn't put the video specs of the 1DX Mark II in the 5D Mark IV because they wanted people to opt for the 1DX Mark II. And both the 1DX and the 5D have kind of hindered video capabilities because Canon want everybody to go and buy a cine camera, which for me just isn't happening. And that brings me on to another comment that I see from a lot of people, which is, if you want to shoot video, buy a video camera. Yes and no. You know, if you were shooting films, documentaries, that sort of thing to be broadcast or whatever, then yeah, cine cameras, that sort of level is what you'd go for. That's what would be kind of justified. But for shooting like YouTube videos and stuff like that, cine cameras are a bit overkill, and I'm not shooting professional video. I do professional photos. So I want good quality video, but I can't justify getting a completely second camera. So an all-in-one hybrid camera works perfect for me. And whether you like it or not, this is the way of the world, okay? We live in a society now driven by convenience, okay? People don't want to have a camera for video and a camera for stills because it's just more money to spend and more shit to carry around that's not required. I mean, I don't know about the rest of the world, but here in the UK, there is not a week that goes by that there is not some mention somewhere of a big high street retailer either having to cut back on jobs or close stores or just kind of go into liquidation and shut down completely because they cannot compete with online retailers. And online retailers are so popular because they're so convenient. You know, so that's my standpoint to Canon, okay? I don't bash Canon because I hate Canon so much. My loyalty to Canon just kind of dwindled away because they weren't doing what I was hoping they would do. You know, I wanted to see them keep pushing, keep growing, and kind of sitting back as a Canon user and watching all these other manufacturers throwing out these cameras that were catching up to and then surpassing what Canon are offering. It just felt like Canon didn't care about the customers. They didn't give a shit about what the customer actually wanted. You know, it felt more like Canon were just being one of those people who plays the prank where they put the little £5 note on the piece of string. So just as you think you've got it and you go to pick it up, they snatch it away and it's like, oh, just a little bit closer. Oh, no, it's gone again. Oh, just a little bit closer. Oh, no, it's gone again. It just felt like this never-ending road of no matter what they brought out, it was never going to be as good as what other people were. And as long as people remained loyal to them, it was never going to change. Sony, on the other hand, feel like they're targeting the area of the market that I'm currently sitting in, and they're doing a much better job of bringing out stuff that people actually want. You know, so I had basically what I was looking for in a camera, what I hoped would come out in a camera. Canon failed to meet those expectations with the 5D4 and the 6D Mark II. Sony more than surpassed them with the A7 III. I moved to the A7 III. Now, and I hope Canon pull the finger out. I really do, because they're a fantastic manufacturer. They're kind of the bedrock of photography, and to lose them would be a complete shame. And also, you need competition in order to drive this. You know, the only reason, you know, Sony are bringing out these cameras and Nikon brought out the D850 is because of the competition. They're all battling with each other to try and best each other. That's what causes progression. You know, if there was only one manufacturer and no other alternatives, they wouldn't need to advance anything, because you'd just be like, well, yeah, you know, either buy it or don't have a camera. They're your choices. So I hope that Canon do change their mindset and bring out more inventive stuff. Would I switch back to Canon if they did? No, because I don't need to. There's no, you know, this camera, this setup I've got now does everything that I need it to do. Obviously, if in the future there comes a time where Sony aren't offering in their cameras something that I want/need and Canon are, that's when I would consider a jump back. So, what do I think Canon need to do? Well, obviously, I think they need to stop with these incremental changes and these little tweaks here and there, and they just need to, you know, pull the finger out and get back to the days of old in being inventive, being creative. You see patterns every week on Canon rumors about all this tech of stack sensors and curve sensors, and it feels like they're only bringing out patterns for stuff to stop other manufacturers from doing it themselves. I would like to see Canon bring out a mirrorless camera that rivals the A7 III and the A7R III. You know, I think if they do, it's going to be far more expensive than the Sony offerings, but I would at least like to see Canon acknowledge the kind of the changing market and bring out a really good mirrorless camera. You know, because if anything, it's going to keep the pressure on Sony to keep bringing out more and more cameras as well. I think in terms of the lenses, as I said in the 70-200 video, I think Canon needs to stop looking at lenses that are already the best on the market and focus on ones that aren't. You know, they've updated the 35 and 85mm L lenses, so update the 24 and the 50 and the 135 and bring out some newer versions that work a lot better on the higher resolution sensors. You know, aps-c lenses as well. I think Canon are very guilty of purposely neglecting their aps-c lenses to try and drive people over to full frame lenses. I think they bring all these new models of aps-c cameras out to get people involved in photography, but then when they want better quality lenses, they have to look towards the full frame options. Then when they've got all these full frame lenses, people are going to start thinking, well, to get the best out of these lenses, I need to buy a full frame camera. But before you go all keyboard warrior in the comments saying that this is another Canon bashing video, it's not, because Sony are by no means perfect either. Because there's no question that the Sony cameras are designed with the intention of kind of latching onto disappointed Canon and Nikon users and bringing them from other camera manufacturers over to themselves. But I think they're missing the opportunity in trying to get people into the Sony ecosystem to begin with. Because, like I said, one of the big things that I think is holding people back from switching over to the likes of a Sony mirrorless camera is that they've got all of their old DSLR lenses that they don't want to go through the hassle of selling and changing. You know, but people have only got all of those Canon lenses because they've spent so many years building themselves up through the Canon ecosystem and acquiring them over a period of years. I think Sony need to bring out an entry-level mirrorless camera to kind of get people involved in Sony from the very beginning. Because you look at the Sony lineup, you've got the A9, the A7 III, A7R III, and probably soon to be announced A7S III, and the A6500. Okay, the A6500 is a great aps-c camera, but it's not an entry-level camera by any stretch of the imagination. 400 and whatever autofocus points and 11 frames a second and 4K video and stuff like that. You know, I think they would be far better off bringing out an entry-level baby Sony Alpha camera to rival the M50. Just something to get people hooked into the Sony system to begin with, rather than trying to nab people from somebody else's ecosystem. But to go with that, they are as guilty as Canon, I think, of not really pressing their aps-c lenses. They've obviously got the benefit nowadays. Samyang are pressing quite heavily with newer lenses. Sigma and Tamron are coming on board as well, but Sony can't rely on third-party manufacturers to give them the lenses that they need for their lineup. I think they need to come out with some more budget-level lenses to go with an entry-level camera to get people interested in their system from the get-go. You know, I think Canon and Sony, between the two of them, have kind of got the perfect combination, but obviously in two completely separate worlds, because Canon have nailed down getting people into their ecosystem to begin with, but are kind of hindering themselves in the higher end market by having this mentality of trying to force people to upgrade further and further along the line. Sony, on the other hand, have kind of nailed the higher end of the market in that give the people what they want in an affordable package, but haven't bothered with the lower end of the spectrum. So I hope this kind of clarifies my thoughts and opinions, okay? And maybe, hopefully, lets you see me in a better light if you were somebody who thought I was just a Canon basher and a Sony lover, okay? bash Canon, obviously, you know, kind of Canon make themselves an easy target as far as I'm concerned, but I want to see Canon push themselves more than they are doing. I don't think Canon are giving their customers what their customers deserve, and I don't think it's fair. You know, Sony, I've been absolutely blown away with how well the kit works. You know, the setup is perfect for me, but I appreciate it's not everybody's cup of tea, and I'm not expecting it to be everybody's cup of tea. And they're not perfect. You know, there are areas that I think they need to improve. Their lens lineup needs to grow, both in the aps-c and also the telephoto lenses as well. But, you know, I also then appreciate that Canon have been at this game for 30 years and have grown up their lens lineup over that period of time. Sony, on the other hand, were coming in from a complete fresh. So you've kind of got to give them a little bit of leeway in as much as they need time to, you know, lens lineups don't just appear overnight. They need a little bit of time just to build that lineup up. So if the Sony lineup still looks like this in 4 or 5 years' time, I'll be bashing them as well. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with what I think Canon and Sony should be doing? Do you think they should be taking a different approach entirely? What about Nikon? What do you think they should be doing with their lives these days? Leave your thoughts and comments in the box down below. Thank you so much for stopping by, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.